Joining me today on the latest episode of the Gray Area Podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Kevin Gray Sports, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports. I am joined by New York Knicks, an NBA reporter for the Athletic NBA. You can find him on Twitter at Mike Vorkunov. Mike Vorkunov joining me on the program today. Mike, how are you?
Good, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for taking the time with me. Obviously, it's a busy time for you and the folks in the Athletic with the new NBA season, obviously right around the corner. How excited are you, given the fact that the NBA season just ended not too long ago, and here we are already in the preseason getting ready to start a new season?
I mean, it's a little weird. The Knicks haven't played since March, so I've been with a lot of downtime. But then on the other hand, everything just happened so fast since the last season ended that it does feel like things have been kind of like so accelerated the last few months that it's a little bit jarring just to see how tightly packed everything is now.
And as far as your coverage of this team is concerned, a Knicks team that has gone through quite a bit of transition over the recent months. Leon Rose starting to take over, obviously, in terms of basketball operations there. Tom Thibodeau, the new head coach in New York. How are you feeling about this new regime and what you expect from them as they continue to put things together for New York?
I mean, I don't know. I think they're still kind of a blank slate. They had a pretty quiet, pretty I would say kind of boring offseason. There were no big hits, no big misses for the most part. And so, they've stayed kind of pretty conventional, showed a little bit more creativity, I would say, than the previous regime. But I think there's a lot still to be learned about them. There's they don't have any track record. Leon Rose doesn't as an executive, and just still not sure really about his team building philosophy. Everything so far has been pretty status quo. So I think there's still pretty much a question mark going forward.
And for Tom Thibodeau, obviously a guy who's been around the block in this league, has had a lot of success in this league. Is he the right coach with the kind of mentality that he has with his grind-out style that would fit this young basketball team and what they're attempting to establish as far as the culture is concerned there?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's always hard to say like who's a good coach for a team. I think those things can be so variable and so many things go into play. But I think so. You can just tell from the first few games they needed someone who's going to work them hard, who kind of is an established coaching presence. And Tom Thibodeau, for all of his warts as a coach, is a good like coach. You don't know how it's going to go for like, let's say 5 years, but from a year-to-year basis, he'll do a good job in terms of X's and O's and just the motivation, all that type of stuff. And I think for especially a young team like this that really needs a lot of player development, I think it was a good hire.
And for this team, R.J. Barrett, other guys like Kevin Knox and others, this is a very young team that's still trying to grow and establish itself in terms of an identity. As far as R.J. Barrett is concerned, what are your expectations for him going into this year under a new coach and what he can continue to grow to be as a player in this league?
I think it all kind of revolves around the jump shot for him. If the jump shot is working, I think the ceiling gets to be much higher. You saw the first half of their preseason opener against the Pistons. It was looking really ugly. I think he airballed 2 3-pointers. He was 2 of 10 shooting overall. And then he kind of got it going from the post and get it closer to the basket in the second half. And then the second preseason game against the Pistons was much better. But I think, the big things really are, obviously what happens to the jump shot and how it comes around and all that. But it's really just, how he develops as a playmaker, how he develops as an on-the-ball facilitator. I think with his skill set, his body size, the expectations for him when he went number 3 in the draft, it's really to see if he can eventually become, the first or second option on a good team. And years like this one, much more than last year, which is just erratic in so many ways, will probably tell that and what he eventually becomes. And so it's going to be interesting to watch him play this year and just what he shows out there.
Who needs to step up alongside R.J. Barrett for this team to continue to show the kind of growth and progress that can give Knicks fans going into the future, the kind of confidence that this is a team that is showing that kind of maturity going forward?
I mean, Obi Toppin, obviously the number 8 pick in the last month's draft. So Obi Toppin, it's going to be interesting to see what he becomes. We have 2 preseason games to go off, and honestly, that's just really not a lot. It's not really much of anything. But he's a foundational piece, right? That's what happens when you take someone 8th overall in the draft. And Mitchell Robinson is probably the other of the big 3, just in terms of the young players that the Knicks have going forward, who could potentially become kind of a, core pieces for them. There are other players like Frank Ntilikina. I guess Kevin Knox is still in there. Manuel quickly went 25th overall. Dennis Smith Jr., the former Mavericks point guard. But I would say those three are the real building blocks for the franchise. And then everyone else is kind of, we'll see what happens with them down the line type of thing.
Yeah, speaking of Obi Toppin, of course, a native of New York, gets a chance to play at home now, coming home to play with the New York Knicks. How excited are the Knicks fans to get one of their own in a Knicks uniform? And it seems like he's excited to be a part of this franchise going forward here.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely seemed hyped to get drafted by the Knicks. And I think Knicks fans were a little bit skeptical at first. But then they saw him play Friday night, and they got a lot more excited, just in terms of how he looked, how he played, his athleticism, the other parts of his game. So he had I think he's going to have a good rookie season. I think he'll be in a position to put up some numbers with the Knicks, and that should kind of get everyone in more hyped on him as the season goes along, I would say.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, because obviously the New York Knicks have always been in the limelight with respect, whether positively or negatively, with respect to how good or poorly their team is. Take us inside the mind of a Knicks supporter or fan and the team that you cover, given the expectations that surround this team, the owner of this team, or the governor, I should say, of this team, and James Dolan and others. How do Knicks fans probably basis in your
mind? Man, that's a complicated question. I don't know if that's a mind that I want to enter into. I think really, there's not like one type of Knicks fan. I think really what they're all looking for this year is just growth. Like, they understand it's gonna be a rough year. They see the roster as it is. I think they just want to see kind of like growth from RJ Barrett or growth from Mitchell Robinson. See what Obi Toppin is as a rookie, and that's really just kind of what they're looking for. Is just some signs of hope that aren't built around like, hey, the Knicks could sign someone in free agency, or this is the latest 5-year plan, or this year they're going to try to sign Giannis Antetokounmpo in free agency, like stuff like that. I think they just want to see internal growth and build out that way, and that's kind of what they're looking for.
Has fatigue set in for this fan base with respect to this team throughout the last several years where they've struggled, or is it more so, look, we just got to continue to hope and feel that this team can do the right thing going forward, even now with some regime changes that you're seeing now?
I mean, yes. To both questions, I would say, yeah. I mean, there's fatigue from the losing. There's hope in the young pieces there and moving forward, and obviously now they're looking to the 2021 draft, and Cade Cunningham, the chance of getting him, and whoever else could be your top 5 to 8 picks or whatever. So it's really just all of the above. It's you've got to find hope through the difficult times type of thing. So it's just kind of like pivoting from one thing to another. And really, that's what fandom is about, right? Like you've always got to look forward if you have nothing to look forward to in the present as much.
Yeah, and I'm sure for Knicks fans, it's not cool to see on the other side Brooklyn with guys like Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. What were your first impressions of them getting on the floor together for the first time, and what you saw from them in their limited action together?
Yeah, I didn't get to catch the game because it was the same time as the Knicks game last night. But just seeing clips, it looks like Kevin Durant is, back for the most part. I don't know if he's like 100% all the way back, but he looked pretty good. If Kevin Durant is, 90, 95% of himself, then the Nets are definitely a finals contender just because he's the top 3-4 player in the game. And so surrounded with Kyrie Irving, and it seems like they can do, cool, fun things on offense, especially with the talent that they have. And so we'll see what Steve Nash and Mike D'Antoni and the rest of the coaching staff there can do for him. But I think the Nets are going to be pretty fun this year.
And how do you handicap the East, obviously, with teams like Milwaukee and others sitting at the top, and now Brooklyn emerging with the return of Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving? Where do you handicap the Eastern Conference relative to the West, of course, with the Los Angeles Lakers as NBA champions?
I mean, I think the Lakers are the clear favorite in the NBA this year, both as the reigning champs, and just you look at how they got better in the offseason, and they have LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and the East kind of has a number of teams who could be a finals team who could potentially push them in the finals, I think. I'm not ready to say that, the Sixers or the Nets or the Bucks or I'm trying to think, maybe the Celtics get there eventually this year. Jason Tatum takes another step forward. The Heat, of course. And so I'm not ready to say that they're at the Lakers level, but so the East is very top heavy with about 5 to 6 teams there that could conceivably make it out. of the conference. But I don't think it's you can say any of them are in the Lakers class at this point.
And as we switch over to the Western Conference for just a second, obviously a team that, I intimately covered down here, of course, of the Dallas Mavericks. As far as Luka Doncic is concerned, where do you see him as a player in this league now that he's a first-team All-NBA or a MVP favorite going into this year? What do you make of him as a player and how he continues to grow?
I mean, Luka's awesome. What's he, like 21? Like he's probably, like one of 3 MVP favorites going into this season. I mean, the Mavericks just have this star player, and it's gonna be fun to watch them build around them, see who they put around them, and just how those pieces come together in terms of roster building. So it's gonna, the Mavericks are gonna be a must-watch team this year just because of Luka, and obviously Kristaps Porzingis is healthy. That's a really dynamic duo at the top of the roster. So Luka is obviously, he's a stud, and it's gonna be fun to watch him for the next decade or whatever.
And I'm curious your perspective on Kristaps Porzingis, of course, formerly of the New York Knicks, was traded to the Dallas Mavericks as part of the Dennis Smith trade. What do fans that cover the Dallas Mavericks or know about the Dallas Mavericks should know about Kristaps Porzingis from how his growth has changed from when he was in New York to where he is now currently?
It just seems like he's building out. His whole time in New York, basically he was playing for 3 years, and he was injured for the last season there before he got traded. It was about getting bigger, getting him healthier, getting him stronger, all those types of things, and building out his game. And I think all those things still exist with him. With the Mavericks, he's got to become healthy for a full season, for a full playoff run. That's the big key for him. But I think by now everyone knows what he is. He's a very good shot blocker. He's the paint presence on defense, especially just protecting the rim. And then I'm going to be interested to see where his game goes offensively. As a three-point shooter, he's shown he can do that. He's got to be a little more consistent, but just whatever else he does in terms of adding to his offensive arsenal and just being a compliment to Luka Doncic.
Yeah. Do you think Porzingis got a bad rap while he was in New York? Was he unfairly criticized for some of the things that he did or did not do, and that's why some of his reputation was a little bit different coming to Dallas?
I don't know that he got a bad rap. I mean, I think he's kind of fairly covered there. I think really the fan base at least turned on him as soon as he got traded. That was complete turnaround as soon as that deal went down. He went from hero to villain very quickly amongst the Knicks fans. I don't think that there was any unfair coverage of him. He's a good player. He has very visible skills, but there are still a lot of question marks around them, just in terms of his injuries and then what else he does offensively outside of shooting threes and kind of finishing around the rim and building out his offensive game. But the partner of Luka Doncic, if he's healthy and that all comes around, that could be a very strong duo.
Yeah, and we think that this could be a 1-2 combination that could last for quite some time here in Dallas. And as you look at your overall NBA preview and picture, what do you see, Mike, in terms of how this season will play out, given to where obviously the Knicks are in their growth in being a young basketball team, but also the overall NBA picture based on what you are seeing from this league?
I mean, the Knicks got a way to go. Listen, they need to hit on one player who's at least all-star level at this point. They don't even have that much. There's not a clear-cut guy who can be close to an all-star level player, which some teams at the bottom do have. So there's a lot of room for growth there. They have to, they have to do that. They have to have multiple definitive starter level players, which I don't think they have yet. That's why the outcome or the outlook for this season is so bleak. They have to see if RJ Barrett becomes a guy who can be an efficient offensive player and a starter. Mitchell Robinson can be a starter. See what Obi Toppin becomes. So there's a long-term plan there that needs to play out and see if the players that they're banking at the moment can become legitimate starters. First of all, what am I getting to? Even higher caliber of player and in the league, whether that eventually becomes acquiring someone through trade, if someone wants out and the Knicks have the picks and the assets to get it done, or whether it's free agency or just internally, they need to get to a level where they're, both a playoff team, but also show that they have players who are worthy of building around for the future.
I'm interested because Leon Rose has a reputation, of course, of being a former agent and having some very powerful clients in his past. Is he the kind of guy that can turn around the culture of this basketball team and make it, once again, an attractive place for players to want to come and play when you start thinking about trading free agency in the future for this team?
I don't know. I got nothing for you. Sure, maybe not. That's the thing when you hire someone who has no track record to go with. I can be out an optimist and say, sure. He did it at CAA. He was CAA Sports is a big kind of like conglomerate of an agency, right?
Right.
With various tentacles and so many people there that it's not just a one-man operation. Like if he was, David Falk or something, to use kind of a legend in the agent game. But I don't know, like truly, we'll see what he does. Obviously he's had a delayed start for the most part. I think he was like 10 days into the job before the NBA went dark there for however long that it did because of the coronavirus. And now he gets to restart. He gets his first coaching hire in there. I got someone who's known for a while, someone he used to represent, and he's building up the front office and all those things. So we'll see. And I don't think it would be fair to say either way, just because there is nothing to go off.
Sure. No, I love that answer. It's just like, look, I'm in the dark just as much as everybody else is trying to figure out with respect to Leon Rose there. I thought he was such an intriguing hire when they decided to bring him on. So as we get ready to get you out of here, Mike, I'm curious to know your perspective on where the league is relative to how they finished. Obviously, success in the NBA bubble, being able to crown a champion, but then going into this year, obviously teams are going to be playing in their home markets, traveling, and the risk of the pandemic really taking hold in this league and players testing positive. How do you think the league will handle itself this year, given what is expected to be a interesting year for this league?
I mean, look, for the bubble, right, they got to create their own world. It was tight. There was a lot of testing. I think universal testing, really, for everyone that was in there. So they got to construct their own ecosystem, and they had an amazing success of a finish to the 2019-20 season. I think there were 0 positive tests after everyone kind of got to Orlando past the onboarding stage. And so that's a big difference from how this season started, where they have to live in the real world, right? There is no bubble anywhere. There is, we've seen it what happened in baseball, and that was like during the summertime. We've seen what happened in the NFL, which is playing into the fall and the winter. It's a lot harder to pull this off when you have people who live where they normally live in large metropolitan areas, who have to live a life that's like pretty close to normal, or whatever that is during the pandemic, and trying to pull off a season in the midst of all that. So I expect that there will be a bunch of hiccups. I expect that games will be postponed, things will be moved around, like the NBA split its schedule in a way to allow for that, to make up for games. I think to basically need to have the time and the leeway to deal with pandemic-related stoppages and starts and fits and all that. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. It's really a rough time to start a season.
Yeah.
The pandemic is worse than it ever has been in this country, and a vaccine might be on the way, but things are pretty bleak right now. So we'll see what the NBA does and how all that goes.
Yeah. Mike, tell the folks where they can find you in terms of the work that you're doing, and what can we expect from your coverage of the Knicks and the NBA this season with The Athletic?
Yeah, I mean, you can find me at The Athletic. I cover the Knicks for us. Subscribe to The Athletic if you haven't already, and if you have, thank you. And I'll be covering the Knicks all season long, however this season goes. I think this is just a wholly unpredictable season. Not just for the Knicks, for the NBA as a whole. And so I think it would be only a foolish person would try to say they know what's going to happen, just because of all the many variables involved.
Well, Mike does a terrific job covering the New York Knicks for The Athletic. It's going to be a very interesting year for this team, a young team that's still growing, that has a lot of expectations, hopefully, for its future. But nonetheless, for Knicks fans, look, it is what it is for them, and I'm sure they'll see what happens with this team this year. You can find him on Twitter at Mike Vorkunov. He is a Knicks and NBA reporter for The Athletic. Mike Vorkunov, good enough to join me here on the program. Mike, thanks so much for the time. Really appreciate it, and look forward to your coverage of this team. And hopefully Knicks fans won't get on you too much about what you write about the Knicks this year.
Yeah, I'm used to it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, man.